overview of where you are, what you're doing, what your job role is, what company you work for. And before you say that, I'll just mention that we're, hopefully everybody's okay with us recording this. We're hoping to use this in the future for information to give to students who are interested in the ChemE health space. So with that, I'll hand it over to Paige and she can give her intro.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Paige, and I currently work for WL Gore in Flagstaff, Arizona. My current role with Gore is a process engineer working in the cardiac realm on a new product development project.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige. Lydia, do you want to tell us about your current position and what your current job is?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lydia. I also work at WL Gore based in Flagstaff, Arizona. I am a quality engineer and I support a commercial manufacturing line, and I basically make vascular grafts.
Cool. We're definitely, just for the audience, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper of what their day-to-day roles look like in a minute, but I'm going to hand it over to Kate, who will give her introduction of where she is currently in her medical career.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kate. Thanks for having me. I'm currently a first-year medical student in Rochester, New York, but I'm from Seattle, so I know the area well.
Thanks, Kate. Awesome. All right. So we're, and again, please use the question function if you have any questions to anybody. We've definitely got a set list here of just questions to go through and kind of get the conversation going. So to get that started, maybe we'll start with Kate, since you're in medical school. I know it's still a training position, but can you describe a little bit about what your day-to-day is like while you're doing your training in medical school?
Yes, so I think my day-to-day probably looks similar to all of the students that are on. I'm in a lot of Zoom class. It's just that now I'm not taking specifically engineering classes. I'm taking true medical classes. So it's very early in the medical education for me. So I haven't branched off very much from the curriculum that's set, but I'm already finding ways in which my chemical engineering background is very applicable. I think engineering degrees in general are very versatile, and I think the one thing that always comes up is engineers are systems level thinkers, and I think that human biology is one of the most intricate systems out there. So already I think that's probably the way that engineering is playing into my education is just thinking about how systems work and how systems fail.
Cool. I think that's one of the really exciting parts of applications in this interface between engineering and medicine, is that use of your knowledge about how systems work and sort of the complexity of systems and the variability in systems and how you want to try and either control or understand them. So Paige, can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you in terms of being in a process engineering position at Gore? I know there's some of your work that you can't comment on because it's protected with intellectual property, but at least on the things you can tell us about, can you get into some of those details?
Yeah, definitely. So as far as my work goes, kind of the day-to-day for me is I work in the manufacturing facility, kind of directly with manufacturing associates, where we're working to develop new processes, looking into material characterizations. I think that's where I pull in a lot of my experience from ChemE. Is working on those types of things, like whether that's looking to try to develop a process for a bond. That bond might be related to some requirement that level that relates back to the physiological loading conditions that device sees. Things like that we're working through right now pretty actively on a day-to-day.
Cool. And I know, Lydia, you're also at Gore, but you're in a very different role in a very different part of the company. What does that look like for you in terms of your day-to-day?
Yeah, so because I am supporting a commercial manufacturing line that's always running, basically 50% of my time is devoted to just supporting manufacturing, making sure everything's running okay. If someone does something outside of their procedure. I help assess the impact of that to the product or to the process. So that's about 50% of what my day looks like. And then the other 50% is kind of devoted to projects outside of supporting manufacturing. These can be anything related to compliance or risk documentation. It can kind of be anything like in terms of process improvements. So that's kind of what my day looks like. But yeah, it is very different from new product development because I'm supporting a manufacturing line.
Cool, thanks. I know that that both of you mentioned kind of this difference in being part of like a core engineering team that does medical device manufacturing versus being on the like commercial manufacturing support side. Were those both roles that you foresaw yourself going into? Like, were those the type of roles you knew you were going into when you started, or those things that kind of developed from just getting into the company and then sort of progressing from there?
Okay, do you want to start?
Sure. So for me, it was, I guess, somewhat of a happy accident where the company placed me when I started my career at Gore. And it's been an interesting evolution to be a part of. When I first joined, I was in a very early R&D phase of the project I was working on, have been a part of projects being killed and moved on from. Times my job felt very much so like I was, doing fundamental research, trying to understand certain aspects of responses we were seeing clinically. Now it's much more focused where we've, kind of realized the path forward and we're pushing towards commercialization. So for me, the focus has really shifted pretty significantly from very early research and development to, doing machine validations, helping develop processes so that we can take that to the next level. So.
Yeah, and for me, I'm still in the position I was placed in from the very beginning. So I knew there would be some type of manufacturing support aspect to my job. Of course, it was my first engineering job out of school, so everything was very new, and I had to learn different sides of my job, which is, supporting other people who are on the plant, and then also supporting my technical team and having different projects. So yeah, it's been a lot more of a stable, stable starting place in contrast with Paige, since I've been with the same team and the same people for about 2 years now and could really get opportunities to just grow and develop. So that's one thing that I've really been thankful for in my position.
Cool. And Kate, what has your evolution looked like since getting your bachelor's degree in chemical engineering? Can you kind of elaborate on your decision to go to medical school, what the time between your ChemE degree and medical school has looked like, and kind of what was involved in your process?
Yeah, so I didn't decide that I wanted to go to medical school until I was close to graduating. So I think that was kind of an unusual path. And I think that ultimately what led me there is thinking in my mind about, I imagined different paths for myself. And I think there's such value in going out and putting yourself in positions to see if you will like something. When I started in college, I thought I was going to be a mathematician. So I took a lot of math classes and I got to theory, and I knew I was no longer going to be a mathematician. So that's how I ended up landing in chemical engineering. And from there, the things that I was interested in were the things that I got involved in. So I started doing biomedical research, and there was just so much that excited me about what I was learning, and not necessarily, I could apply the things I was learning in class to these projects outside of class that really excited me in the medical field. So I think pretty early in my chemical engineering days, I knew that I wanted to be in the health and medicine field, but I didn't necessarily know that it was specifically medicine. So when I was close to graduating and I was thinking about it more, I really started thinking about the impact that I wanted to have, and the one thing that was really missing for me in research was being able to talk to people and you know, work on teams and see the real impact that it had immediately on people. And I think in medical research, you know, it's so valuable, but it can be years for processes to be developed. It's such a long path for, you know, drug development, and that work is so important. But I think that I really valued human interaction that I wasn't immediately getting in research. So that is how I started really thinking, oh, medicine might be the way I want to apply my chemical engineering degree. So the next thing I went out and did was volunteering in a hospital. And I think all of those things combined. I wanted the medical research. I wanted something where I felt like my engineering background could really you know, be utilized, and I wanted to be working with people every day. So I think all of those things really came together for me, just based on combining my extracurriculars, my you know, my schoolwork, and you know, once I graduated, I you know, I did 2 years just in research to you know, just to make sure, and that was indeed what worked for me. So I think that my advice there would be, put yourself in the setting and make sure that you can see yourself there, because I think that is how I ended up going from chemical engineering into medical school.
Awesome. I think that sets up a really nice next question, which I'll ask everybody on the panel, and any of y'all can respond. But before I do that, I want to encourage the audience to go ahead and start dropping your questions in the chat, or have them kind of teed up to unmute or raise your hand and ask, because we'll definitely try and get into some audience questions after this one. But I'm going to set it up with, I think it's really cool to see that basically between the three of y'all, you've all covered a huge range of the space in which a chemical engineer can work with in medicine. So Kate, you're on the patient care side and working towards being on the patient care side. Paige, you've been in the R&D and then in the product development. And then Lydia, you're on the manufacturer, where we actually need to make these entities to get to people, right? You have to actually have a process in place and a way to actually make these devices to get them to people that need them. So what has inspired you most about being a chemical engineering in the medical and health space? What do you find inspiring? What do you find exciting about what you get to do on a day-to-day basis? And whoever wants to jump in first can.
I'll start. So it's kind of interesting for me because I never really saw myself in the healthcare space until I came to Gore. And so everything was very new to me. I had no background at all in biology, but I was able to just kind of learn on the spot throughout my job because I'm supporting vascular grafts. We get complaints, we get feedback from physicians and people who actually use the device every day. And so, I mean, I was just surprised at how, I guess, how close I was to the patient, it almost felt like. And I mean, it's going to sound very generic, but I mean, I do get inspired every day just thinking about how many devices we make a day and how many of those devices go into people and how they help people. And I mean, it's just, I never thought I would be doing something to help people in this way. And so that has been a really nice surprise for me.
All right, Kate or Paige, questions to one of you. And then we've got some questions in chat rolling in, but I definitely want to hear what y'all's inspirations are, because you're inspiring for a lot of people who are coming up behind you. So I definitely want to hear.
All right, I can go. I think one thing that always gets me so excited in my days now is when I come across a concept, and chemical engineering is just so applicable. Whether you're talking about hemodynamics and blood flow, fluid dynamics is a huge part of chemical engineering. I think you can talk about like real things that are happening in people that a chemical engineering background can be so valuable to improve human health. So I think in a different, it's kind of the same thing as what Lydia is saying, is that these chemical engineering principles that we studied in school are going to improve people's lives. And I just think that's so powerful.
Okay, so for me, I think on a daily basis, you kind of get hyper focused and zoomed in on what you're working on, whether that's, hey, I'm working on this process step, I'm just trying to get this done today. For me, I try to take a step back when I'm in those situations every day and think about how what I'm doing is actually potentially going to translate into a life-saving medical device. And that's really the biggest thing on a day-to-day that pushes me forward in my job. Also, I'm lucky enough to get to work in a pediatric space. That also pushes me because it's not something in the business space, those populations tend to be smaller. So that's not oftentimes an area that people get to work in the space that I'm in. So that to me is something that, propels me every day to go to work and work harder and kind of keep pushing down this path. And, if there is an opportunity where I get to realize that one of these devices makes it into a person to save their life, I think for me, that's going to be one of the biggest accomplishments that I've felt in my life. So I'm looking forward to that moment, and really excited to get the opportunity to be a part of that process for sure.
That's awesome. And for the audience, Paige is like hitting on a heartstring for me on the pediatric thing, because my research group focuses on neonatal and pediatric populations, and I can definitely attest on the research side too, not just in product development, that is a highly underserved population for a lot of medical device, medical therapies, diagnostics, et cetera, intervention for that group. So she's definitely pulling on heartstrings from my end. We have a question in the chat from Rahaf, who asked how hard it was to work in the healthcare and medical device development space if you have no biology or human anatomy background. Lydia, I don't know if you want to pick up from your experience previously that you made.
Yeah, that sounds like me. There was definitely a learning curve for sure. And what was nice about Gore is that they offer classes of various different subjects. And so one of them was kind of more anatomy and biology based. And so that was really helpful. But at the same time, even without taking that class, I could do my job just fine, just by learning from other people on my team, reading through documents, internal documents, just talking with others and learning from others, being on the manufacturing line. So I really wouldn't say it's like a huge obstacle. If anything, it's just an area, it's just another skill that you can learn and grow in. And I would definitely not let it deter you in any way from going into the medical industry, because you can learn anything.
It's a good engineering mentality, I feel like, and a good chemical engineering mentality. All right, we've got a question from Madeline, who asks, this question might be best directed towards Kate, but I'm wondering if any of the panelists have thoughts or experiences about using ChemE training in a public or environmental health manner. More specifically, I'm curious about community health and underserved populations, but any thoughts on that topic are welcome.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think these kinds of projects are one of the reasons that medicine was the path I chose to take. I think that there are so many opportunities once you're in medical school to gear towards your specific interests. So environmental justice, rural medicine, all of those are things that can definitely, you know, be addressed, or you can work in those areas if you want to. So I think this just goes back to the versatility. If you have an interest in something, this is a platform where you can go into anything you want. So I think if you have an interest in those areas, there will be opportunities to utilize this degree in medicine. I can definitely tell you that there are absolutely projects and outreach groups that are in those areas, in medical school and in medicine as a field as a whole. I don't know if that kind of gets at your question, but those training opportunities are definitely there.
And Paige, I might ask a little bit of a follow-up just based on what, even just you mentioning about the pediatric space, like can you comment on how companies like Gore, at least in your experience, have identified target populations or target diseases or target types of devices or technologies that are needed, and kind of how that might also get it working with populations or areas, could be disease areas as well, that are underserved?
Yeah, for sure. So Gore has multiple pipelines within the medical sector. For instance, Lydia works in vascular, whereas I'm in a cardiac pipeline. I think things that are commercialized within the Gore cardiac, things like occluders to close like holes in the septum of the heart, things like that. But as far as picking and determining paths, I mean, there's always going to be a business aspect to it when you're in actual, I guess, in the private sector. However, Gore has a pretty extensive, what they call an innovation college that kind of, does deep dives into trying to understand how we can translate. There's also a translational medicine group that helps to figure out the technologies and the materials that we understand how to work with. How can we translate those to different spaces and sectors within health and medicine? So as far as that goes, there is, as far as picking the target populations, I think there's usually some position and some technology benefits, in addition to Gore has a strong brand promise that they're want to get certain things into physicians' hands. So I feel like it was kind of vague, but sorry.
And Madeline, definitely, or anybody who asks questions, definitely feel free to like unmute and follow up if there's anything you want to follow up on as well.
Yeah, I thank you for answering my question. I will probably end up looking into sort of more the rural medicine side of things, like making healthcare accessible. I know I grew up in Seattle, and being in Seattle, homeless population is very present, and that's something I'd be interested in working with, but all of your information was helpful, so thank you.
Cool, and thanks for sharing that, Madeline, as well. We've got another, a follow-up actually from Tammy to Rahav's previous question. How do you all suggest we strengthen our biology background to prepare for the bio or biomedical field alongside our chemical engineering curriculum?
I can add something there real quick. Sorry, Kate.
Go ahead.
I think one thing that I felt would have been very helpful for me in my chemical engineering role would have been to explore a little bit more of mechanical engineering type backgrounds. Not to say that to be a mechie, but to expose yourself to things like loading conditions. I think we cover some of that in fluid dynamics when we talk about like shear stress, things like that. But that comes up quite a bit in particularly the medical device world. Those types of things come up a lot, and that's something that on the job I've been able to learn and adapt to. But I would say that if you have an opportunity to get exposure in that space, it's very helpful going into at least the medical device world.
Yeah, I'll just add that for me, it was important to take elective classes in the biology area, and I think, you know, it may be hard to make room for those, but certainly, you know, they were definitely prerequisites for medical school, and I think, you know, I was interested in them anyway. So in terms of preparation for me, I would say that was kind of a requirement to take some classes in that area as preparation.
Kate sets me up well to, before Lydia jumps in, to give a good plug for the ChemE program. We have a whole plan of health study that also, even if you're not going pre-med, has a lot of different elective courses that are related to health and medicine, including materials and device development, et cetera, that are offered by a range of departments, not just chemical engineering, but are a great place to also explore some of those elective options. Sorry, Lydia, I was gonna jumped in. I had to give a plug there to the ChemE department.
No, you're
Nicole, for all those listening, Nicole, who's one of our academic advisors, is on the call and also available to answering questions about specifically advising things if anybody comes up. Oh, and she just linked to it in the chat. See that teamwork there? All right, Lydia, go ahead. Sorry.
You're good. I would just add that if I had to go back, I would definitely just take like a basic anatomy class if that's offered, just very basic. You don't have to go too deep into that, but also I think this was mentioned, but a material science class, just to understand like the vocabulary and the terms that are used, that would be really helpful from a medical device industry perspective.
I was going to say, if you still offer colloids and polymers labs, those were actually super fundamental to a lot of the material development and characterization work that we do at Gore. So definitely helpful.
Also very hands-on too, which I think gets kind of into that more like more real world experience, less curricular experience. That actually, I might throw in, while people are typing in chat questions, I might throw in a follow-up question, which is if y'all could just elaborate on some of the extracurricular experiences that you felt like were pretty accessible to do while doing your ChemE curriculum that were complementary to the ChemE curriculum. And they could be job experiences that you had in addition to just like extracurriculars in terms of RSOs or outreach or service or research or whatever that you found were beneficial. And I'll preface this with, I'm not paying either Paige or Kate to say, put a plug in for my research in my lab, but they might.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start and put a plug in for Dr. Nance's research. But yeah, all jokes aside, I think medical research was probably the biggest extracurricular for me in the health space, in addition to volunteering in a clinical setting. You know, besides that, I definitely tried out interest groups. I think I at one point joined the pharmacy club. I don't know if they still have that, but I think just testing things out in the area was helpful to me. And I will also add that I think, you know, extracurriculars don't necessarily need to be in the health space. I played soccer all 4 years, and you know, I think you should always make room for all your interests. So I will plug that as well. You should not necessarily only be doing health related extracurriculars.
Yeah, just to quickly add on to that, since I didn't really know where I wanted to go, especially in the health field, I didn't really take any extracurriculars dedicated to that. But I had a part-time job. I was a barista. I can't remember what else I did, but all those soft skills that you learn too, just knowing how to interact with people, learn from people, all those skills I use daily. So that's also important too.
Like Kate, I will also plug Prof. Nance's class lab, and then also a class that I took with Prof. Nance. I don't know if you still offer it, but I remember taking. Yeah, nice, awesome. That there's a ChemE elective that I took taught by Prof. Nance that kind of helped connect some of those dots on how I could leverage my chemical engineering learnings in the health and medical space, which was excellent to see. And for me, outside of ChemE, I had been a veterinary nurse throughout my, I guess, whole time at UW, and then prior to that. So I had exposure to medicine and kind of knew that's the direction that I wanted to head in. But really enjoyed my time at UW as well, just getting involved with student organizations. Also have to put a plug in for Wiki and AICI, was involved in those organizations. It was really fun and really energizing to be a part of that. So
maybe I should pay you on chocolate or something in the near future for all the plugs. I want to circle back to something Lydia mentioned about teams, but we have in a minute, but if we have some time, but Catherine's thrown a question in asking if, I think this is to Paige and Kate, if you could elaborate more on the kind of research you did, and if you can provide any tips to get involved with research.
I can go first. So I think getting involved in research can kind of be a little intimidating at first, and I think when I was looking at areas that I wanted to start doing research in, I started certainly on the departmental website, and I looked at all the research areas, and I kind of narrowed it down to Dr. Nance's work. And I think, emailing professors without any kind of background, that can be really intimidating. And I think one thing I learned is that you cannot be afraid of failure or getting rejected. I think that's normal, and it should never stop you from reaching out if you have an interest. And so I think my best tip for that is, identify labs that you think you would want to work with, and have a reason for reaching out to professors, and it should be a good fit for you too. So I think you should really be looking for a research setting that you will really thrive in. So for me, I definitely knew I wanted to be in the medical space, and the research, I will get more specifically into that. We were using nanoparticles to probe the brain microenvironment, and using it as using these nanoparticles as a biomarker for neuroinflammation. I'm curious what Dr. Nance thinks of my summary. But I think that was really valuable. Those 2 years in undergrad research were really valuable for me to develop some skills in a research setting, and from there I could kind of move on to other areas of interest in research. So when I graduated, I moved into another lab doing joint work between neonatology and chemical engineering, and that was really looking at models of hypoxia ischemia in the neonatal brain. So it's kind of getting closer to the clinical space and seeing research that was directly in that pediatric space. So those are my 2 research projects. I don't, Paige, did you have anything to add?
I was just going to add, kind of elaborating, Kate, on what you said about being willing to kind of put yourself out there, that I do think you do have to be willing to reach out and, express the interest. And also, I think a good thing to do is to reach out to fellow lab members and, try to understand what it's like being in that lab. Also, making sure you can take on the commitment to that and balance your other priorities that you have that might be competing with those opportunities. And also out there, as far as my experience in the lab, I spent some time in Professor Carruthers' lab working on, I'm blanking on what they're called now. Is it astomers? I can't, yeah, okay. It was like, I think I remember. And that was really interesting work where I got to learn a lot about mRNA, RNA sequencing, and then spent some time in Professor's lab, not nearly as much as Kate spent, but spent some time working on sequencing, genome sequencing of her colony of rats, mice. I'm kind of blanking. Sorry.
It's all right. If we could all remember what we did 3 years ago after a year of pandemic, then we're all in better shape than we thought we were. I will also put up just for any students who are interested in the chemical engineering program who aren't currently in ChemE that are on the call. Right now, about 75% of our undergraduates in chemical engineering participate in undergraduate research. Now, obviously, that's not all health and medicine, but it is something that's highly encouraged, and I think fairly accessible in our department. And most of those students are working in chemical engineering labs across a wide variety of areas, but some also work in material science or mechanical engineering or bioengineering or other department labs as well. But it is definitely something that both the faculty support and the students seem to find benefit in. We've got a question from Olivia. I'll direct this to Lydia first. Which is that if, in your experience, what was the most difficult aspect of transitioning out of school and into industry? And we'll start with Lydia with your take on that.
That's a hard one. I think the hardest part was, I guess, just learning everything. That is a very generic answer, but there was so much to learn, and not just about how to do my job, but how to document what I'm doing, how to follow regulations. There's so much more than just making a device in the medical device industry. You have to be compliant with different regulatory bodies, and there's just so much more than designing or creating your process in your device. There's all these people interactions. There's kind of this like team hierarchy. You have to learn managing yourself. So a lot of project management skills that I had to learn, and I'm still learning today. But most of it just takes time, and that's okay. And I was very supported on my team to just kind of enjoy learning everything. And so it was never very stressful or where I felt inadequate, which I think is really important, because it's very overwhelming at first being in an industry when you just come fresh out of school and there's all these rules on how to do things. And so I think just my advice would just be enjoy the learning, enjoy the newness, and just give yourself time to adapt and learn. And no one expects you to know everything on the first day. So that would be my 2 cents.
Awesome. I feel like that's great advice for all of us to internalize anytime we
Thank you
transition
so
into
much.
something new. Thanks for that question, Olivia. That was great. We do have another question. I wish we got 3 in here. Marie is asking, what is your advice for freshmen and sophomore students who know they are good in science but have yet chosen a major? I'll give the first answer to that. Pick chemical engineering because we're awesome. Okay, I'll hand it over for real answers from the other 3. Anybody who wants to take that on the panel.
I'm happy to take this one. That I was definitely in that boat. I certainly did not know what I wanted to do. And I think one of the things that was really helpful for me was looking at what professors were working on in departments. And I think that can tell you a lot about what you can do in that field. And I think, one of the reasons I ended up choosing chemical engineering was because you can really go do anything still. You can go into environmental science, you can go into health and medicine, you can work on batteries. And I felt like that left a lot of doors open for me. So I think that my advice would be look what people are doing in that field and really think about whether those careers would work for you and whether there's a variety of careers, more than one option that would work for you.
Yeah, I was also in the same boat where I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I picked chemical engineering for kind of the same reasons Kate did, but there's just so much opportunity. You can kind of do anything with the degree. And so that was the main motivation of me wanting to go into chemical engineering. But after having worked with all different types of engineers, it really, I don't want to say this, it might sound bad, but it really doesn't matter what you do specifically. I think engineering in general, it kind of wires your brain in a way where you're able to take something really complicated and kind of break it down and try to understand it in a very methodical way. And so I wouldn't stress too much if you really don't know what you want to do. If you stick with engineering in general, you will definitely have opportunities and you can make anything out of it.
I'm just going to echo Lydia's point, because even though I know we're all chemies on the panel, I know a big stressor is picking a major and feeling like the what ifs of if you're picking the right major. And I think one thing that we're trying to emphasize in the college, especially in the College of Engineering, is that there's a lot of different ways to get to the same endpoint. And ChemE is one of those. And we really, very, very excited about what ChemE can do in health and medicine. But Lydia is hitting on a really critical point, which is there's a lot of great degrees that you can get. Of course, we're the best. I'm not going to say that we're not on this panel, and I also think that, so I'm heavily biased. But there's lots of great degrees that can get you to the health and medicine space. I'm going to direct this next question at Paige, because I think this aligns with a comment you made earlier about just what your hopes are in terms of the work you're doing. Where do you hope to take your career in the next few years? And Kate, if you wanted to answer the question, Lydia as well, but Kate, yours was a note that maybe post-med school what you wanted to be doing. But Paige, if you want to take that to begin with.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing for me that I think this reflects back a little bit on a past question too was getting into a process engineering role initially for me was really uncomfortable. It wasn't a space that I felt very comfortable working in personally. Definitely experienced a lot of imposter syndrome starting in that role. For me, interacting with people and connecting in those types of roles is comfortable than being like a hard and fast engineer that's going to go, solve a problem. But in terms of my career development, I'm really trying to get comfortable in that space and allow myself to develop and, take on those very technical projects. I'm also, working in a space where I'm a readiness champ for a project. So there is some project management stuff that I am working on, but I'm really trying to not push myself more in that direction that I'm comfortable with. And push myself towards, hey, you can do this, hard and fast engineering. I can figure out how to work a bonder and do all these things that I never thought I could do. So that's really my career focus right now is getting really comfortable in the space that I'm in. So.
Kate, where would you like to be post-med school?
Yeah, it's a tough question on this. What do you see yourself in 10 years? I think that, there, in some ways you're kind of locked in once you're in medical school. There is a path that you're going to take. You're going to go through residency and, you do research. And I think there is also quite a lot of flexibility. I think you'd probably be surprised at how much opportunity there is for you to get involved in other projects, whether it's health policy, health equity, environmental health. I know someone mentioned community health earlier and reaching rural communities. And I think I don't have a good answer about where exactly which of those areas I want to fall into, but I feel very fortunate to have so many doors open and opportunities that I can really explore in medical school. And I think that there's anything you're interested in, you can go do. So that is a very vague answer, but yeah, I see myself exploring all those areas in the next 4 years, and that'll kind of dictate where I go from there.
I mean, this will be a good plug for a theme takeaway for everybody, is that chemies can do anything, right? That's going to be our messaging. Lydia, maybe I'll throw this question to you. And I just want to note now, since we got about 10 minutes left till the end of the session, that if for some reason we don't get through all the questions that have been asked, we'll see if we can identify a way to maybe get the questions to the panelists still, and maybe still get some answers or feedback to share with the audience. We'll see if we can sort that out, because there's a lot of great questions in the chat, and I thank everybody in the audience for engaging with us. And I also will note that Nicole is putting links for follow-up information in the chat as well. So if you're tracking that, those might give you some additional resources. So Olivia asked, what kinds of internship experiences did you have during college, and what were the most important takeaways from these experiences? I don't know if anybody, Lydia, if you want to take that question, or if anybody else wants to, but I'll throw it to Lydia first.
Yeah, my internship experience was very different. It didn't have anything to do with health and medicine. It was kind of like a lot of coding and computer science, and to apply that to like big engineering manufacturing processes. I would say I didn't learn a lot of things that I applied today in my job, but I think just being in a working environment, knowing how to ask questions, managing your time, understanding what you should be doing and prioritizing things, those kind of skills were my biggest takeaways and what I still use today.
Awesome, thank you. Paige or Kate wants to add on.
I was just going to throw in there that I did an internship at Immune Design. They're an immunotherapy company, a small startup in Seattle, and I had some really neat experiences there. One of them was getting to work with two lead female process engineers who were kind of developing all the processes, and really getting to see how they were successful in their roles was really a big moment for me to get to realize that. And also just wanted to and getting some exposure to what it would be like in engineering role in industry for sure.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. We've got a question from Victoria. It says, since ChemE is a good choice for working on medical devices, would it be a good major choice for a career intended on working on limb prosthetics and prosthetic design? Maybe that can go to anybody who wants to take it.
I think so. I think ChemE is honestly the biggest thing for me that I learned how to solve. I think Lydia mentioned this earlier, really complex problems. And you can apply that to any discipline that you pursue. So I really think it is a good way to get a strong foundation to apply to the area you're interested in.
Awesome. Thanks, Paige. We've got a question from Tammy. Can you give some examples of how you use chemical engineering principles and bring what you've learned in classes into your workplace? I think Kate mentioned earlier the fluid mechanics and blood flow, and Paige, you mentioned the also fluid mechanics earlier. I know that that's definitely a factor in vascular grafts as well, but if there's others that y'all think about on a regular basis or use on a regular basis.
Heat transfer is a big one that comes up as a process engineer, particularly looking to develop different processes, whether you're trying to figure out how to bond two things together. Also knowledge of materials is very big too. If you're trying to pick your material set, you need a material that performs or has some tensile strength. You're going to kind of dig into what you've learned to kind of help inform those decisions. So
maybe the real question is, do you ever use fugacity? Okay, just making sure. I knew it wasn't a useful term. I'm just kidding. No, any thermo lovers out there, don't hold that against me. All right, Kate, sorry, I think you were about to unmute maybe.
I was just going to add that I think that there is more examples than people automatically think of. The mass transfer is relevant in our kidney filtration. Our cardiovascular is a pressurized system. So I think specific principles are highly applicable when you narrow into a problem. And I will just go ahead and reiterate what Lydia said. I think engineering is really a problem-solving approach. So in this case, our biological processes, you can really understand them well if you take that engineering approach to them. And also, I am really thankful to say I will never calculate a fugacity coefficient again.
Some of us try to avoid it, even though we're professors of chemical engineering. So, I'm with you. All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. So I had asked the panelists ahead of time if we could close with some rapid fire questions to kind of leave us with some inspiration. So if the audience is up for that, we might move into that rapid fire session for the last few minutes. And then please, like I said, if there's any additional burning questions you have, throw them in the chat and we'll try and see if there's a way that we can get responses to those and get those back to you. But if we're ready for it, I'm gonna start our rapid fire questions if Paige and Lydia and Kate are ready for it. All right, Donna, I'll unmute. I know we've got, for everybody on the call, we've got animals running around in the background in most of these places. So we've been trying to keep it quiet from that end. All right, we'll go in the order of Paige, Kate, and Lydia for these. So first rapid fire question, starting with Paige. When you think of your ChemE degree and where you are now, what's one word that comes to mind?
Possibilities.
Kate.
Journey.
Lydia.
Opportunities.
Awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received, starting with Paige?
Foundation first.
Be confident.
That you can learn something from everyone.
All right, and our last rapid fire question, what's a habit that contributes to your success?
Direct communication.
Curiosity.
Not procrastinating.
Nice. I like that one, Lydia. Awesome. All right. Well, we are right at about a minute left. And so we'll just take this minute to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you all in the audience for such great questions. I think it's really cool just to see and hear your perspectives via the questions that you're asking. And definitely want to thank Paige and Kate and Lydia for taking time out of their schedules, and they're also in different time zones, to join us today for this panel discussion. So if everybody in the audience can give them a round of applause or use your reaction features to the degree that you enjoy reaction features, that would be great as well. And we'll thank everybody for being here. And if you have any additional questions or you want to sort of check out the links that Nicole put in the chat, we're always happy, both Nicole and I are happy to follow up with anybody one-on-one as well. So thank you for being here today. I like all the reactions right down the bottom.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Olivia.
guys.
Thank you.